introduce yourself to all the lovely people at home.
I am Bill Perry. I'm a musician. I live here in Oxford, Mississippi. I was born in Chicago, Illinois. Lived in California for 12 years before living here in Mississippi. Mississippi has now been my home for a little over 20 years. And I've been playing music for just about as long. We moved here in 1987, my family and I, from California and from Los Angeles. And my dad, who is a blues musician, Bill Howland Mad Perry, at that time, he had been out of the music game for some time, pretty much throughout the 80s and throughout most of my teen years. And he wanted to get back into music when he moved back here to the South, so he had gotten in a band called The Relaxations. He started getting his groove back on here in Oxford, Mississippi. I was already into hip-hop music. I was into Run DMC and all the golden era rap stars of the day of the 80s and partly of the 90s. And I was making my own little music. I had acquired a drum machine, a Boss Dr. Rhythm, old classic drum machine, and I had a realistic keyboard, but I think it was with another keyboard that I had acquired later, an old Casio that I started making the music with. And I also had a Yamaha 4-track machine, and you know, it was the thing, man, to be able to dump 4 sounds on. You had to buy a certain type of cassette, you know, in order to record various layers of different sound effects on one tape. Like if you wanted to record a drum beat, a keyboard, various keyboard sounds and such, even vocals, you can do this with this 4-track machine. And it was through that particular noodling around with music that I had started learning how to compose music, if you will, you know, learning how to put a song together. And watching my dad get back into the business and seeing what he was doing also made me want to get into music from a professional perspective. And we started a family band in 1993 called The Perrys, and it was through that particular band that I had became a professional piano player, or keyboard player more so. I had started absorbing a lot of the styles from the greats, the jazz piano greats in particular, Herbie Hancock, Keith Jarrett, Chick Corea, Art Tatum, Bud Powell, Thelonious Monk, Cedar Walton, Kenny Barron, and the list kind of goes on, but those in particular, Keith, Jarrett, Chick Corea, and Herbie Hancock are my 3. And I just really dove into their styles, and as well as trying to find my own voice in the midst of all that. And yeah, that was the beginning of my journey in becoming a professional musician. It was around 93. With my family band, we were a mixed ensemble as far as musically speaking. We did R&B and blues was, I guess, our forte. My dad had done a lot of soul and R&B initially, but he was influenced by blues guys from back in the day. And so initially we were doing R&B and blues, and then we would do, you know, stuff like pop stuff. And that particular unit, actually, we didn't do jazz. Jazz was my own thing, and I had started having a predilection for jazz because of the kind of piano players that I was getting into, of the guys I was naming. And as a kid, I remember, like, you know, liking the grooves of like the cartoons I would watch, like the Pink Panther or the Peanuts, like with Vince Guaraldi or, you know, Henry Mancini and the stuff he would score for the Pink Panther, and liking that music and not realizing it was jazz. And I was into that. And then, like, in the hip hop world, being that like I said, that I liked rap and everything, and was a rapper myself and everything, you know, the guys that started blending rap and hip hop together were people I started following. These guys were like blending the styles together and doing it quite well, getting some old school like jazz classics and blending it into the music, and getting young guys like myself hip to wanting to, you know, dive a little deeper to where they got those samples from. Like, that was a cool groove. I'd like to hear the real song, you know. And I myself had never acquired a sampling machine. So I was always in this position of having to create my music, and it would end up coming out with the same kind of groove. Like when I'd make a bass line, it'd have kind of a jazzy kind of a feel to it, you know? And my chord selections and stuff always had this kind of jazz tinge to it. So I started realizing that's my voice, if you will. You know, like I express myself pianistically and in some ways compositionally, you know, through the jazz medium. But I'm not just a jazz musician. I don't go around saying I'm the jazz guy or whatever. As a whole, I'm starting to see outside of myself, or I have seen outside of myself for some time now, with like giving back in some way with what I do, beyond just entertainment or entertaining. Being able to like use music as a vehicle to like educate people about philanthropy and goodwill and charity. I had a project called Mother Universe and All Her Children, and it was essentially a short film about 36 minutes, and I called it my visual concept album because it's in 5 segments, and it's 5 movements from my album. It's almost Fantasia-esque in that regard, with you know, music and visuals accompanying one another in this kind of flow. And so there's just various images of space and different movements. It's like about the beginning of the universe to the end, as far as conceptually. The proceeds from the viewings of this particular project went towards this thing called Piano Discoveries, where it would where the program is about, you know, music education, educating kids about the piano and I think other various instruments, music theory, music in general, music education. And it's done at the University of Mississippi, spearheaded by Dr. Ian Hominick and Stacy Rogers at the music department at Ole Miss. That was my way of just giving back through what I do, you know. It's always a challenge for an artist or of various mediums, but speaking as a musician, firsthand experience from this particular angle, it's really challenging to try to make sense of being an artist in such a world, whereas we got all these bills we have to pay, and it's not always a lucrative field in terms of money's coming in and flowing consistently, and there's always these risk factors and such. So we're always posing this question to ourselves, I think, as artists, like, you know, is it all worth it? And I think if you think outside of yourself, if you can look at what you do in your art beyond yourself and your own personal goals, I think it will start making more sense from a broader perspective, and you'll become more content with what it is that you do. Yeah, I think there's like a symphony in life. I think there's a certain harmony and disharmony, if you will, that occurs. And there's a balance, there's a rhythm, there's a pulse in life. Our heartbeat, our pulse are indications, you know, of that. And just the way things are in nature. You hear music in everything. Music doesn't have to necessarily come from instruments or even the human voice. Whales sing to one another in the oceans. Bees use a certain type of buzzing sounds to communicate to one another. The sound of the wind, the way it blows through trees, has a certain type of allure to it, of musical nature. And just the pulse of life in general. There's a certain harmony that goes on. Even the planets abide by a certain harmony that goes on celestially in our solar system. The way the planets rotate around our sun in this particular order. Music is just organized noise. There's an order to the noise, or an order to the sound, because there's always sound. There has always been sound. The moment that human beings decided to organize sound the way we have and call it music, it's not new as far as nature goes. We just organize it in our own way. I think that there is constant music in the world, from the frequency of a buzz in a light bulb. There's actually a tone, there's a pitch to that electricity in that bulb. You know, there's a certain frequency that emits a certain tone, and it is there. It's not necessarily musical, but there is a tone. There's tones in everything. So organizing sound is a wondrous thing, because you're taking something from the invisible, if you will. It's an invisible canvas of sound, and you organize it in your mind, and you try to make it tangible emotionally to others by conveying it through your songs. That's how you make it tangible. That's how you make it connect, you know, by manifesting it through your soul in a way that makes people feel. I have, I guess you could say, two different mind states with that. There's the audience that I like to have, that is the intimate audience for, say, a piano solo show or for a trio show. And that's the type of audience that I would just like to just be mindful of the music, you know, pay attention to the music, you know, approach it like you would some sort of concerto or some symphony or something like this. You know, that ideally for me would be the way I would hope someone would take a show like that in. But then there's the other side of me that is like, you know, the band side, if you will, the guy that's in a band, or coming from that perspective, even my own band, the Bill Perry Trio, whatever, where I'm trying to get people up and dancing. And that's a whole nother perspective. I'd rather for everybody to be out there dancing and standing up and really grooving, and not, you know, if I'm doing my job and you know what I mean? If I'm doing my job and I'm holding up with that end, I'm hoping that I'm entertaining and they're out there dancing. So it's all about aesthetics, you see. It's about what type of setting it is. Like every Friday at my Soulshine gig, that's a family atmosphere. People appreciate the ambiance of the music. It's not the type of thing that they go to you know, just specifically hear me play piano. It's not a piano concerto kind of thing. But they don't mind the music in the background. They appreciate the jazz standards and my own originals that I put to the mix. But now when I was like playing with the Fade to Black crew back in 2013, that was a hip hop situation. And that was about, no, get up and dance. Like we, you know, if it hits you, you know, we would ideally prefer everybody to be out there just jumping up and down, man, you know, acting crazy, you know. So that's my duality in music. Those are the two characteristics of me musically. That's the two extremes that I live on. You know, from the very tame to the let's take it to the damn hilt. You know, that's me.